Good evening, everyone. My friends Bawini and Masria, who's here. And I would like to say that my presentation, I listened to the first presentation, I said, oh, I might not have gotten the memo because I did not focus on trucks. I actually just focused on urban mobility. But so in keeping with the first two discussions, though, I will discuss a bit about the trucking in the Philippines. But my presentation is actually divided into two parts. The first part is the context of urban transport planning in the Philippines. And the second part is how we are striving to move towards safer and greener transport sector. So just let me just start off. Okay. Everybody knows this. A 2012 Nations Environmental Program study estimated that more than 50% of the world's population are living in cities and that it will grow to 80% in 2050. Now, the Philippines is not far behind. In 1955, we were only 29% of our population were in urban cities, but we have actually breached that. No, I think we've reached that to 50% in 2019. Now, the reason I want to bring that up is because when you have a lot of people in your cities, there's also increased mobility demand. Now, with increased mobility demand, right, you have also increased what do you call this need for infrastructure. Now, with increased mobility demand, also would have an increase in the pressure for motorization, right? However, motorization does come with other, externalities like congestion, road crashes, and transport accidents, pollution, and lack of inclusiveness. So, for instance, for the first part, no? A study that was conducted for the Philippines, for Metro Manila. Sorry, a lot of my data is Metro Manila. Other cities are not as well studied in Metro Manila. So a lot of my data would be from Metro Manila. So for this one is a study that was conducted in 2015, where when they looked at the level of the mix of transport on the road, more than 70% of the road is actually taken up by private vehicles, which only carries 21.6%. Now, in terms of traffic volume, that's actually 53.1%. That means that we do have a lot of private vehicles. A look at traffic deaths. A look at traffic deaths. According to the Philippine Statistics Authority in the Philippines, road traffic deaths increased by 39% from 7,938 in 2011 to 11,000 in 2021. But please note that there's a dip. The reason that it dipped was because during the pandemic, there was actually restricted mobility. But as you can see, we're not so far behind. I'm actually glad that I would present the road crashes by vehicle type. As you can see, um, in the Philippines, our main problem on the roads are actually not so much trucks, although it's problematic as you can see, but really also motorcycles. We have a lot of motorcycles that figure in road crashes, and uh, and then trucks. If you can see trucks, let me just talk about trucks. Therefore, in line with the previous two presentations. One of the problems for the trucking industry in the Philippines is that our trucks are old. I was listening to Dr. Nuxit earlier and he was talking about ADAS, and I said, okay, how do we fit that in trucks that are purchased secondhand from Japan, converted into right to, because they're right hand drive, they're converted to left hand drive. And then as they enter the Philippines, their age is automatically zero. So even if they're 10 years old in Japan, when they enter the Philippines and they're converted, that makes them like very, very new. They're treated as new. So most of them are that. Okay. And another thing is that I'd like to just also share that in December of last year, there was a 19 vehicle road crash. And the cause of the road crash was actually a truck that went to the other lane because the driver was speeding, not drunk, speeding. But another problem for truck drivers is also fatigue, because we impose, as the Alex Dr. Criswell was actually talking about, we impose long hours because of long hauls, right? Long distance trips. So they have and we have truck bans, so they cannot enter the cities on specific times of the day, so they have to come in really early or move out really late. So that is a problem for us. And although we have truck lanes, they're also not being followed. Okay, so we do have a lot of issues, but for the Philippines right now, we are grappling with motorcycles, um, as a major cause of road crashes. Now, the third issue, if you remember, for urban transport is pollution. In the Philippines, based on the 2016 um, greenhouse gas emission inventory, transport was a third largest contributor for greenhouse gas, following agriculture and energy. Now, within the transport sector, it's a road sector that has that is the highest contributor. So that's a third, as I was saying, this is a third externality when you have increased motorization. You talk about pollution from your motorized vehicles. If, this motorized sector is left unmanaged. Of course, the fourth one I mentioned is a lack of inclusiveness. And I think this is very important. I know we're talking trucks, but urban mobility, it's also very important to also look at passengers with limited mobility. In the Philippines, we've started doing that. When I was working with the Department of Transportation, we did run a survey looking at the challenges of persons with limited mobility. And sometimes when we talk of persons with limited mobility, we always think that these are the people with physical disabilities. But these are not. UNESCAP actually expanded the discussion on limited mobility to look at this particular aspect of transport planning from four areas: travel impairments, life cycle impairments, like if you are a child or you're a pregnant woman, or you're a mother with you have several young kids, or physical impairments, and people with learning difficulties. And also, I'd like to just share that this is actually exacerbated by the fact that our current mode of transport, if you can see it, has really high step boards. It's very difficult for you to get on. And yet, a study that was conducted in 2016 found that 12% of the Filipinos aged 15 and older experience severe disability. Only 19% of the total population of 15 and above have no disability, experience no disability. So therefore, what does that mean? About 1 in 4 persons in the severe disability group rated using transportation as a problem area. Therefore, transport, if you talk about urban mobility, we cannot actually just say it's one size fits all, right? Another survey which talks about this lack of inclusiveness is a survey that we conducted back in 2020, which showed the sexual harassment were experienced by women and members of the LGBTQIA plus community in two areas: on board and in waiting areas. We also conducted a survey for the persons with limited mobility, and we found out that information is very important to them. Before the journey, they'd like to know if they can do online ticketing, fare, and discounts. How long is the queuing time? Because if you have a disability, it's really difficult if you have to stand for long periods of time. At the station, you need to know location of boarding areas, location of public toilets. I remember this is very important, and location of ticket booths. When you reach your destination, they would see, okay, I need to know where the drop-off points are, where the location of exits are, and the wayfinding of other, and to the next transport mode. So as we can see from this survey, in all parts of the journey cycle, the important is accessible information. Now, that actually sets a context for what I'd like to discuss in improving urban mobility in the Philippines, because this is actually a big issue for us. We're shifting towards safer and green transportation. As I have mentioned earlier, road transport is a major contributor within the transport sector. So when we submitted, or when the Department of Transportation submitted its unconditional nationally determined contribution to the Climate Change Commission in 2019, it was composed of four programs. Unconditional, meaning that regardless if it will have funding from other partners, it will continue because these are programs of the department. So these, if you can see, this includes bus rapid transit, public utility vehicle modernization program, railways project, and motor vehicle inspection system. These intervention actually focused on transport fleet modernization and inspection, modal shift, and infrastructure development. Again, as I've mentioned, three out of the four are actually public transport. So if you've been to the Philippines, you would know that public transport is problematic right now in the Philippines. It's actually that's why it's called a transport crisis right now. So I would like to focus my presentation on the public utility vehicle modernization program, which has now been renamed to Public Transport Modernization Program. Let me just explain to you why that is so. When it was launched as a public utility vehicle modernization program, it met a lot of resistance because the operators and the drivers actually thought of it as an anti-poor program, which actually just focused on the vehicle, missing the whole point that the program actually looks at the entire system. So now it's been renamed. So what's in the name, right? But it's very important. It's been renamed to Public Transport Modernization Program so that it actually focuses on the system. So I'd like to just discuss, because I don't have a lot of time, I'd like to discuss two main components of the program. So the first one is fleet modernization, right? To enhance efficiency and safety. Um, okay. So for instance, I think I showed you earlier that our jeepneys have really high step board and they're actually located in the back. And so this is very dangerous. This is this is proven to be dangerous because you can get hit as you are, boarding the vehicle. You can get hit by a vehicle behind the jeepney. And the way it's done here in the Philippines, we don't even have proper boarding and alighting in most areas, right? So you just have to run and catch up with the jeepneys. And this has been problematic for a lot, no? Even for elderly persons, because it's high step board, it's difficult for you to climb, and then the drivers don't wait for you. Now, I'd like to direct your attention that part of fleet modernization is that the doors have been moved to the side, and the clearance from the floor, from the door, from the road is lower. So it's now easier boarding, right? And it also has CCTV. It has speed limiter to actually make sure that public transport do not speed beyond the limit. Okay, so they have that. And we also have, well, supposedly they have priority seats. Okay, and then that's for the fleet modernization. Another component I'd like to discuss is, because of the actually, if you look at this, the title of my presentation, it's just transition. Because we know that public transport is important, but in the Philippines, public transport is also a livelihood. It's livelihood for a lot. So when you make changes, you need to understand who can make the change properly, who can make the change, who can shift to this new mode. Hence, I'd like to highlight that this one is industry consolidation. Sorry. industry consolidation means that because right now a lot of our operators are single unit operators, right? So therefore it's very difficult in terms of regulation. It's also difficult in terms of dispatching. When you talk about one of the components of the PTMP, Public Transport Modernization Program, is industry consolidation. Industry consolidation because it will actually make operations, it will streamline operations, and then the operators should group themselves into a cooperative, and then they would have more uh, room for negotiation, as we have seen in some of our studies, right? So it will also improve the living conditions of drivers, operators, and their efficiency because the modern GPs are more fuel efficient. As proof, I'd like to share with you the results of one of our studies that we conducted for electric jeepneys. It's in one of the cities. It showed that the first of all, they grouped themselves into cooperative, and when they were grouped into cooperatives, they had more negotiation power, so that they had better position to negotiate with electric vehicle um, manufacturers and findings. So as you can see, what we've seen is that their net income actually increased um, because of consolidation. Why is that? Because the price of fuel has really increased exorbitantly over the last few years in the Philippines. So therefore, right? Sorry. So therefore, shifting to electric vehicles have actually been um, advantageous to our operators. In fact, this is one of the enabling factors that we saw, that collaborative efforts among cooperatives operating in the same city have unlocked additional value, with cooperative alliances potentially yielding better procurement and negotiating terms with manufacturing because of bulk discounts. Cooperative alliances manufacturers are also encouraged to put up service centers and manufacturing or assembly in the area. That about ends my unusual presentation because I don't do heavy trucks, but this is something I'd like to just. I was asked to give a quote, but this is how I feel. Creating greener and safer cities requires the understanding that transport is not a one size fits all, because we make that mistake a lot of times. So we design for one person. So thank you everyone for your attention.